Hello, and welcome back to Witch on the Holy Night. My name is Maybe Dennis, and last time we didn't really do much once again. We just kind of went back to school. We studied a little bit for exams and just tried to find out what Alice likes to get her to not kill Sojiro. We spoke with Hosuke Kinomi, who gave us some advice. Probably shouldn't follow it because it's probably going to be a recipe for disaster. And yeah, now we're after the exams. Or at least the second day of exams. So, let's hop right into it. The second day of exams ended, and Sojiro was on his way back to the mansion. The road grew steeper and the woods thicker as he made his way up the familiar slope. Oh right, he's gonna but just chat with Alice one-on-one. This time he's leaving Aoko back with the student council, so it's gonna be him versus Alice. People in town called it not a hill, but a mountain, simply because it took over 20 minutes to climb. This did not sit well with Sojiro, for whom a mountain was something that could not be overcome so easily. The road was paved, for one thing, and the canopy overhead let in plenty of sunlight to guide the way. None of the inclines were especially steep, and no animals lurked in the underbrush. There was no chance of losing his way, no reason to worry about getting lost. Sojiro quietly reprimanded himself for getting so wrapped up in his own little world. In the past few weeks since moving here, he had been constantly comparing the town with his former mountain home. Normally, he would not get upset over it, but in recent days since meeting Aoko, as it happened, he had become rather hung up on the differences. He was none the wiser to why, but he knew that Aoko was a force that could not be stopped. This naturally made him want to quicken his own pace. The mansion where they both lived was the antipathy of her lively personality. It stood out like a sore thumb, even in a town like Misaki. Some people said it was haunted. There were no ghosts per se, but it was inhabited by magicians, so their claims were closer to the truth than they could have possibly known. Magicians with ghosts, or ghost magicians. Lost in contemplation, as he was, the boy failed to notice how his own lack of familiarity with the city life played into the equation. In any case, none of his pondering changed what needed to be done. Tomorrow was the last day of exams. Oh, okay, he only finished day 2. That meant he only had a little longer until Aoko stopped taking responsibility for his safety. If possible, today was going to be the day when the mansion's owner accepted his continued residence there. Sojiro slipped between the trees encircling the mansion and walked down the naturally tree-lined avenue that led him to the front door. Here goes. Taking a deep breath, he stepped across the threshold. The drawing room was where he expected to find Alice. However, he found himself face to face with the most unexpected scene. A few steps in, he arrived at the large foyer extending from the mansion's entrance. But one thing was clearly out of place. The foyer of the mansion was like a hall in a medieval castle. It was illuminated by the cold winter sun casting down through the skylight, unaided by artificial light. The wooden tiles smelled of the outdoors. And there was Alice, dressed all in black, huddled against a column so enormous that it resembled a sharply cornered tree trunk. The mansion was quite literally supporting her frail body, like a mother's lullaby or a gently rocking cradle. The heavy atmosphere within this old building suppressed even the slightest stir, almost as if warding away any disturbance to her slumber. Oh wow. Look at this, she's just taking a nap, sleeping. No chance of attacking Sojiro at the moment, hopefully. There she slept in the shadows of home. Hidden away from outsiders, her sleeping figure was enough to mesmerize anyone who laid eyes upon her. Sojiro instinctively looked at the ceiling, out of sheer awkwardness. He wanted to surprise her, but not in this way. Her slender frame laid asleep by the fireplace. The scene was as beautiful as a painting, yet hard on his heart at the same time. Her slumber seemed breathless. She was too still, with not even a hint of movement. And yet, slumped under that frigid column, under the cold winter sky, happiness appeared to be her blanket. A passerby would not be blamed for thinking that she was in the most peaceful state of eternal slumber, death. Sojiro spoke to himself as he gazed idly upon her. I wonder how she managed to get in that position to sleep. Like, the only thing I can imagine is her, like, reading a book against the pillar. But, like, why would she be doing that? And why would she not have, like, any cushion or something else? Unless she, like, just collapsed for some reason, then that's even more concerning. Bringing her a blanket or something warm did not so as much as cross the boy's mind. Instead, odd as it sounds, the first thing he thought to do was to go prepare some tea. It better not be bagged. He made sure to be as quiet as possible as he opened the drawing room door. On the table, waiting for him, were 3 pills. They were the medicine Alko required him to take every day when he arrived home. Gulping down the vaguely sweet pills and continuing on to the kitchen, he selected a box of tea from amongst the many in the cabinet and brewed enough for 2 people. Alice was still asleep when he returned to the foyer. Careful not to make any noise, he crouched close to the ground. He was startled by how cold the floor felt through his pants. He thought that it would be warmer here by the fireplace, but then again, he had recalled how Alko had referred to it as a useless hole in the wall. What was likely the case was that neither she nor Alice knew how to use it properly. Oh man. Oh, and some biscuits or cookies. After taking the teacups from the tray and placing one in front of each of them, Sojiro carefully pulled his textbook on classical literature from his satchel. He could still see her angry face from this morning. The reason for her anger was still as much as a mystery as the unusual look he saw briefly come across her face. In any case, one thing was certain. He needed to start studying for tomorrow. I wonder if this is a ploy from Alice to see if, like, Sojiro would do anything to her if she was defenseless. Thanks to Alko's instructions, today's exams went well enough, but tomorrow's would be an even more formidable challenge. After how angry she was this morning, he could not expect her to help him again tonight. He complained under his breath as he cracked open his textbook. Apparently, he intended to spend his time in this fashion until Alice finally awoke. The sound of the pages turning was the only audible noise in the grand hall. There was no ticking of clocks or rustling of leaves to disturb her sleep. After a few hours, Sojiro quietly rose to his feet. Oh, a few hours already? She just kept sleeping like that? Part of me is kind of wondering maybe she set up a barrier or some kind of field, but he just walked past it like he did in the first day. So maybe she was not expecting anyone to be able to see her like this. The light that filled the foyer was beginning to turn from white to red. Good conversation, which means none. He glanced again at Alice as he stretched his stiff back. She slept in perfect stillness, just as she had this entire time. How? How? Sojiro arched his brow in speculation. He had no idea what her normal sleeping schedule was like, so he had no idea as to whether he should wake her up. As if reaching the end of a long train of thought, Sojiro gave a quick nod of his head and took his leave of the mansion. Today, work was a shift at the Chinese restaurant in Misaki's shopping district, the Mad Bear. That was interesting. Are we gonna see Hosuke? The uniforms have been made by someone with an obvious preference for garish colors. The orange apron was emblazoned with a cartoonish polar bear slashing a walk in two with its powerful claws. The design resembled warning signs about wild animals seen in the mountains and stood out in Misaki for its one-of-a-kind originality. This was a Chinese restaurant, the Mad Bear. Aside from its name and logo, the restaurant was a type of cheap, hole-in-the-wall dive that could be found anywhere. It faced competition from the ever-increasing number of chain restaurants, though it had managed to last longer than the other dining spots, having received rave reviews on a regular basis. The Mad Bear prioritized the personal touch, focusing on its local clientele, and thus made it a point to offer home delivery. It had earned the affection of moniker QKS, the Quick Killer Shop. Making these deliveries was Sojiro's responsibility for the time being. Places in Masaki within cycling distance fell under his domain. Anything beyond that was handled by a more experienced staff member on the legendary 50cc King Salmon motorbike. But anyways, wait, why is he working? I thought the boss got chewed out for letting him work before exams. So like, shouldn't he not be working before exams? He's got one more day. That sounds like Kosuke. When the delivery workers were not out on deliveries, they spent their shifts bussing tables or washing dishes. The dinner rush was yet to come, and Sojiro and his fellow delivery boys were shooting the breeze while washing dishes in the back. The two were elbow deep in a giant sink as they enthusiastically scrubbed. At least, that was what they pretended to do while they gossiped.
So I love salmon. I would order an entire salmon. You shut your mouth. ワニとかアザラシでも飼ってるんじゃねえかな、そいつ。他に比べてみると確かに珍しい話だと思う。ところで木の実、ワニってなんだ？ What's an alligator? ワニはワニだろう。だっせ、実物見たことないのかよ。まあ俺もねえけどな。今度ガクガク動物ランドのアフリカ特集ビデオを貸してやるから見とけよ。The world's most terrifying animals episode on Africa. It's just gonna be Alco in Africa. This was a familiar pattern of conversation between the two, especially now that Kinomi was used to Sojiro's lack of general knowledge. Their banter was interrupted by the delivery phone. The manager snapped up the receiver and quickly jotted down the order and address. Once he hung up, everyone in the kitchen did their best to avoid making eye contact with him. Nobody wanted to go rushing out for a delivery on such a cold day. I hope it's a Kuonji mansion. The manager singled Sojiro out for the task, seemingly unfazed by his staff's laziness. The manager tore the sheet with an order and address written on it from his memo pad. Sojiro took one look at it before a grimace quietly spread across his face. Oh yeah, it totally is. The manager stared right back at him, as if he could tell what he wanted to say. Sojiro stared in admiration as the manager, dressed in black, marched out of the kitchen in his all-business way. Nowhere was free from the odd occurrence now and then. It was after 10 at night. Sojiro had taken a small detour on his way home from work, and now faced an outraged Aoko as expected. Oh, okay, so it wasn't him, okay. Seeing her so visibly irritated made him feel a rush of relief. Oh, he didn't know why she was angry. He could tell that it was a different type of anger than what he had saw earlier that morning. He set down the cardboard box he had been carrying in his arms and glanced towards the fireplace. The sleeping girl was there no more.
あんたってほんと自分がどんな状態にあるか分かってないのね。
She probably thought Alice killed you. Huh?
いいから今に来て。
She walked briskly to the other room without pausing, leaving Sojiro standing in confusion, head tilted to one side. He proceeded to pick his box back up and followed after her eagerly. He removed his coat and hung it on a hanger as he entered the living room. Apparently, today was one of those days where Alice kept herself locked away in her room. On the table were familiar pills.
説明しなかった私も悪いけど、あなたも帰ってくる時間は守ってよね。こっちはそのつもりで作ってるんだから。
Akko handed him the pills and a glass of water with an expectant look on her face.
薬なら出かける前に飲んだけど、体の調子だって悪くないし、そんなに慌てることか？
は？なんだって私たちがあんたの健康を気にかけなくちゃいけないのよ。
I don't care how you feel. I told you to do this, you do it.
勘違いしてるようだけど、あんたが帰ってくるたびに飲んでるのって平たく言えば毒よ。即効性じゃないから効き目は半日すると出てくるんだけど、その前に新しい毒薬を飲んでおかないと古い毒が体に回ってばったりいくって寸法ね。
If you don't take more pills before then that happens, the older poison will kill. It's just a cycle of poison.
アリスのやつ、これぐらいしないと信用できないって言い張ったのよ。ほら、分かったらさっさと飲む。ま、私もこれ面倒だと思うし、近いうちもっと形のある方法を考えてみるから、それまでこの方法で我慢して。
I wonder if he might actually be on a time limit one day where he just cannot make it home and as a result has to risk the poison killing him.
言ってることは支離滅裂だが、とにかく今まで良くないものを飲んでたんだな。
Ain't that bad? Sojiro took the pills from her and gulped it down. The fact that it was poison gave him no pause at all. As for his roommate's tyrannical behavior, he showed no signs of standing up to it.
まったく、毒を持って毒を制するなんて、また古風な真似するな、青崎もアリスも。
Sojiro's face relaxed into a smile upon finding the funny side of the situation. Akko was utterly dumbfounded as to how he could be happy at a time like this.
今日帰りが遅れたのは、アパートまで荷物を取りに行っていたからなんだ。そういうことなら電話の一つでもすればよかった。
荷物ってまさかそれじゃないでしょうね。
Oh, that's what the box was. I thought it was takeout. Sojiro nodded emphatically as she pointed incredulously at the cardboard box in his hand.
住んでいないのに家賃を払うのはバカらしいから、今日で引き上げてきた。一応いつでも戻れるように話はつけてあるから、3ヶ月ぐらいは大丈夫だよ。
Alright, the person, his landlord was a friend of his dad? I think it was dad? Or someone that he used to be with.
家賃？あ、そっか、そうよね。私ってばなんでそんなことを忘れてたんだろう。アリスが聞いたら喜ぶわ、そりゃ。
Oh no. A smile blossomed across her face as they said. As they say. It was the open, bold-faced look of a child who just came up with a mischievous plan. Sojiro shook with fear at the thought that the smile might bring his way. And suddenly he lost all the money that he no longer had.
段ボール1箱分しかないの？
そうかな。十分多いだろう。それよりアリスは自室か？
ちょっと前に戻ったわ。珍しく食後もここに残ってたんだけど、待ちきれなかったみたいね。
She gave Sojiro a meaningful look while continuing to smile that sinister smile. This sinister smile. This sinister smile. I love it so much.
待ちきれなかったって何を？
そりゃあ、アリスが眠ってるのをいいことに在庫のないフォションとブルーキャリコを勝手に使ってくれたどこかの誰かさんにお仕置きするためなんじゃない？
Oh crap. I didn't know. I was trying to be nice.
フォッションってあのお茶の葉？
そう、私もびっくりしたけどね。アリスがどっかで寝入るのはよくあることだけど、どんな心境の変化か知りたくて起こしたらアリスの方が驚いてたわ。 一体誰の仕業なんだって。
Sojiro clapped his hands together as if remembering something important. He had forgotten to clean up the tea before leaving. The regret written from the forehead to chin delighted Aoko immensely. She's so sadistic.
当然、コマ鳥がとばっちりでドリブルされてたしね。
ああ、俺でも怒る。片付けをきちんとしないなんて、だらしないにも程がある。
Sojiro harshly scolded himself for his failure.
論点違う。あのね、寝顔を間近で見られたから怒ってるのよ、アリスは。
え？そうかな。アリスはそういうのは気にしないと思うんだけど。
あんたはそうかもしれないけど、私たちは気にするの。
Aoko's glare was enough to make the glass shatter. Yeah, she does look kind of angry. There was an indescribable intensity in the way that she said that.
それは青崎たち限定の話か？
世間一般での常識よ。自分が気にしないからって他人もそうだと思ってるといつかやけどするからね。
でもそれだったらロビーで寝ているアリスにだって問題ないか？見かけたら放っておけないだろう、あんなの。
その心意気は立派だけど、そこはそれ。この館の持ち主は彼女だから。この洋館内であなたが出会ったあらゆる不義不始末、失敗失態の責任は宗十郎に押し付けられるの。この意味、わかる？
Aoko's question sent Sojiro into a trance of deep thought until finally he uttered, I have no idea.
つまりここはアリスの自治領なんだな。
You've always been in Alice's kingdom.
はい、よくできました。正確には私とアリスのだけどね。領主は何をやっても許されるってことよ。
She smiled as she spoke and plopped herself down on the sofa. Sojiro remained standing behind the sofa opposite her as he ran over their conversation again and again in his head. The notion of this being their kingdom made him realize that he actually had no idea where the girls had come from or their family's background.
青崎、君ご両親はどうしてるんだ
？He inadvertently blurted out, this being the question foremost on his mind.
生きてるわよ。三崎町から下りに4駅行った東川ってところの地主。死は祖父だけど、今は隠居して両親と一緒の土地に住んでるわ。
I thought her grandfather passed away. I guess not?
そう聞くと、なんだか普通の家庭だな。
Sojiro had imagined something more outrageous for a family of magicians.
両親はね、父さんにはあんまり魔術回路は作られなかったみたいだから、その分私には2世代分の潜在能力があるって祖父は言ってるけど、どうだか。
I'm curious as to how her parents are, because like I know that both Aoko and her sister are quite some characters.
宗十郎の期待してるような一族はどっちかっていうとアリスの方よ。私と違って英国出身だからね、彼女。
From England. Aoko offered nothing more, as if to suggest that was as far as she was willing to reveal for now. Sojiro had insisted on talking to Alice directly rather than hearing things secondhand, so chose not to go back on his word by pushing the topic further.
ま、詳しくは本人から聞きなさい。アリスの紅茶好きもそこから来てるんだし。そういえば、なんで今日に限ってリーフティーなんか入れたの？ティーバッグを使った方がまだマシだったでしょうに。
青崎がそっちの方がいいって言ったじゃないか。アリスは紅茶にうるさいって。
Aoko was momentarily at a loss for words. He seemed so oblivious most of the time, but apparently he was attentive to some details, at least selectively.
ま、いいわ。それより明日の放課後だけど、また一人で帰ってくれない？年明けの行事があるんだけど、その場しのぎで行った餅つき大会が通っちゃったさ。
Mochi making festival, yeah, let's go! Sojiro nodded in acceptance. In fact, he had already been planning to do so before she even asked.
それはいいけど、体は大丈夫か、青崎？ 昨日から寝てないだろ
夕方に3時間ちょい仮眠を取ったから調子はいいわ。
The power naps. Let's go.
そういうあんたこそ体は持つんでしょうね。もう少ししたら昨日の続き始めるわよ。
Oh god, no. Final part. She meant the all-night cramming session, of course. Needless to say, Sojiro was more likely to struggle given that he, too, had not slept a wink. All he could do was give a relieved smile. He thought back to the days just after he had transferred here, when she watched his every move from the sideline and showed him a startling amount of concern for him.
いいよ。どのみち苦労するのは青崎の方だし、異例中の異例はありがたく受け取っておくとしよう。
Aww. His cheery response grated on her just a little bit.
ほんと、くだらないことだけはしつこく覚えてるんだから。
Oh, we've seen this image before. I haven't seen this in a long time, though. She heaved her shoulders in exasperation and dropped her head as an excuse to look away from the beaming smile on his face. It is now nighttime, but not for them as they have to study throughout the entire night. Oh, wow! The following day, the last day of finals had ended without a hitch. That final December hurdle was finally a thing of the past. For all but one student, that is. Hosuke! Oh, okay, never mind. To Sojiro, the greatest challenge was yet to come. He bid farewell to his classmates, all jittery with excitement for the last day of term, and headed into the Shiro Inozuka woods. The road home was no different than yesterday. Like he was reliving yet another day striding up the hill. Yet today, there was a fierce determination in his steps. Today was his last chance, and he wanted nothing more than to talk to the girl. He did not care if she was cruel to him or ignored him, nor whether Aoko was being truthful when she said that she could trap him in a mirror land or something like that. All he really cared about was having the chance to speak with her face to face. But nothing is ever that simple. To tell the truth, what he found upon entering the mansion was not wholly unexpected. It's her sleeping again, probably.
よく寝る子だな、本当。
Yep. The deja vu he was experiencing made him feel dizzy. Faced with an exact reenactment of the previous day, he could not help but blurt out what he was thinking. Alice was sleeping by the fireplace, just as she had done yesterday. The way her legs draped to one side resembled those of a princess in a children's book. She looked more comfortable than she had the day before. Miraculously, he had the rare flash of insight that enabled him to read the situation more clearly.
学校で飛び丸は一人何をしているんだろう。
Upon glancing back at the entrance, he made his decision, took a deep breath, and rolled up his sleeves. If today was a reenactment of yesterday, then he supposed he would play along with that idea. Sojiro removed his shoes and headed for the kitchen. He was off to prepare another ill-fated pot of tea. Since she was angry about him using her precious Fauchon, this time he turned to Jackson's fruit and herb brew. Sadly, this was about as much as Sojiro could manage to amend his behavior. But he had failed to realize that it was not the brand of tea that landed him in hot water, but rather his incorrect brewing method. After filling the pot with tea, he carried it back to the foyer. His breath was visible in the cold air as he sat himself down by the fireplace. Sojiro took a sip of the fruity tea he had prepared for himself and pulled a textbook out from his bag. Exams were over now, but he had been instructed to take extra classes for the subjects from... He had to take extra classes for the subjects from the day one of the school. Wait, from day one of the schools or day one of the exams? Quite inevitable. Because I know it sounded like he only failed the first day. The foyer was warmer than outside, but still far from comfortable. It was enough to make anyone yearn for some source of warmth. Sojiro dove into his electronic textbook in the winter-chilled hall. The class was not very popular, which is why it had been recommended to him in the first place. That fact that everyone who took it started on equal footing made it more appealing to him than the other classes.
けど、青崎の言う通り。
He downed the rest of the tea, having no appreciation for its flavor, and refilled his cup. The tea was still warm, since the ceramic teapot had excellent heat retention.
文字で物事を覚えるのは苦手みたいだ。
He vaguely recalled their conversation as his eyes advanced across the page. The lack of lighting in the foyer was forcing him to rely on the illumination from the skylight. The light cut into that room at a diagonal angle in such a way as to divide the foyer into light and dark areas, with the fireplace in the shadow. Oh, it's so bright! The room resembled an ancient ruins covered in ash. Or perhaps the quiet, forgotten world of the faded fairy tale. The time slipped on by within the white walls of this room, hidden away from the sun. And he made the same mistake as the day before. Don't forget to clean up! The minutes passed slowly for some time until the sound of a textbook slamming shut brought the room back to reality. Sojiro stretched his stiff back and eagerly got started on clearing up. He put his textbook back into his bag, placed his cup on the tray, leaving Alice sitting in front of her on the floor. He said unceremoniously. He spoke as if to convince himself that he had no other choice as he prepared to leave the sleepy foyer behind. But before he could, a sound behind him stopped him in his tracks. Is it Alice? Is he finally going to talk to her? He turned around with his bag under his arm and tray in hand. So as to not cause even a ripple in her teacup, he greeted her.
Yeah.
In a light, easygoing manner. She remained seated next to the fireplace, like a black-eyed sleeping beauty. Her face was as still as a statue, almost no different than it had been in slumber. Looking at Alice now, he realized how different she and Aoko really were. Aoko communicated her feelings openly, even if he never could quite tell where they came from. Her trademark expression of irritation would keep him guessing as to the reason why she was angry, but to her credit, her emotional state was always clear. Alice, on the other hand, was completely unreadable. She might be angry, or then again, sad. He could not tell either way. Her question gave him a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. He could not decide whether it was animosity or perplexity that he had heard in her voice. If the former, this was likely to turn into a replay of their interaction from the other night. The image of the shattered bottles sprang to his mind. Sojiro knew his response would be extremely important, and after struggling for a few moments, he finally worked up the courage to say something. Just not the correct thing, unfortunately. Uh-oh. He had no idea what the correct approach would be, so he simply did whatever came to his mind instead. She gave him no response. Her face said that she detested his presence, but he plowed ahead regardless. Sojiro took a seat and set down the tray once more. Their eyes met. Her inscrutable gaze was enough to turn most people away. But the target of her animosity appeared not to notice at all. He's like, "Hey guys, how you doing?" Despite having suggested that it would take time to explain, he managed to sum things up succinctly. Alice found herself out of kilter, unable to read his true intentions. Sojiro continued on, none the wiser to her bewilderment. Each word he spoke was heavy with emotion. Alice remained utterly unable to discern this boy's intentions. All she could parse was that there was something he wanted from her. But what could that be? What she found even stranger was that he was not speaking to her from a place of fear. Her gleaming eyes looked like they were made of polished quartz. His response had not been what she had expected.
He spoke with pure honesty and unfettered truth. Such boldness, however, did not actually upset her. Their conversation grounded to a halt. If you could even call it a conversation in the first place. Alice grew tense, as if displeased by the strangely comfortable moment of silence between them. Sojiro endured her cold stare, showing no sign of flinching.
話
You may speak now, boy.
私と話をしたいと言ったでしょ。なら好きにしてみたら。
Oh wow. Very approachable. It was more of a challenge than an invitation. He had neither a topic on hand, nor were they intimate enough to strike up a casual conversation. Nonetheless, her challenge hanged in the air, waiting for a response.
じゃあ、あの鳥の話を。ほら、そこにいる青い鳥。たまに見かけるんだけど、君の飼い鳥か？それとも、ほら、なんて言ったかな。プロイだっけ？あの鳥もアリスの使い魔？
Her eyes let slip for a moment a very natural response. It was annoyance, such as that which one might feel towards a troublemaker.
あれもプロイだけど、私とは何の関係もないダッチョウ。
Oh!
ずいぶん古くからいるだけで、私もよく知らないわ。
It isn't hers? Nah. What? Okay.
じゃあ、勝手に住んでるのか？この家に。
勝手になんて、私が許すはずがないでしょう。ロビンは本当に役に立たないけど、あんなのでも母から譲り受けたものだから。
Aww.
失敗続きでも特別に住まわせてあげてるの。
そっか、安心した。ここに住むの、役に立たなきゃダメってわけでもないんだね。
She turned away in silence to avoid looking at his hapless grin. Thus began Sojiro's very lengthy monologue. It started with his part-time job, then moved on to school. Next came the amusement park, and random gossip around town, and last the subject of rent. He spent all of 20 minutes on mindless small talk. Then he ran out of things to say, and finally stopped.
ごめん、アルバイトがあるから、もう行くよ。
And that was that. After finally getting his long-awaited chance to talk to her, he realized he had no exit plan in place. So he returned the tray to the kitchen, placed his bag in the foyer, and headed for the door. She had never seen the boy so candid. Which was why, overcome with surprise, she found herself calling out to him.
待って。
She had no reason to do so, and yet she called out anyways.
何？
その今日はポットがあったけど。
あ、うん。昨日の反省点だったから、結局使ったのは自分だけだけど。
そう。そのポットはコーヒーとの兼用だから。
Ah,
ハーブティーには合わないわ。
rookie mistake. Sojiro's eyes grew wide with shock. Now he remembered that there had been all sorts of cups and teapots in the cupboard, each one specifically designed for a different type of tea.
なかなかに奥深い。あれかな。慣れないことはするもんじゃないってことか。
She let out a vexed sigh.
どうして私を起こさなかったの？
Either she had not heard what he had said, or she had been waiting this whole time for a chance to ask him that. In any case, her question abruptly interrupted his stream of thought. He fell silent with introspection. The thought of waking her had not so much as crossed his mind either that day or the previous one.
言って起こす気も起きることも期待していなかったのはなぜ？
Her eyes were filled with animosity. Lies were useless against such an all-piercing gaze. The setting sun transformed the foyer into a battle of life and death. Lies or deceptive answers would not be permitted. Amidst the palpable tension that filled the room, where any move, wrong or otherwise, was likely to get him killed, he felt pain rather than fear. Alice's voice was icy cold.
preemptively rejecting any response he was to give. The boy vaguely imagined a newborn chick that had fallen from the nest, struggling to survive on its own. It gasped, hanging on to a thread of hope, yet detesting where the thread hung.
言わなきゃいけないか。
Alice nodded sharply.
じゃあ言うけど、別に深い考えがあったわけじゃない。単に寝た子を起こすのは良くないだろ。
It's just rude to wake someone who's asleep.
冗談は聞いてないわ。
冗談じゃないよ。眠っているのならそのままでいいと思ったんだ。話はしたいけど、それはまた目が覚めた次の機会にするべきだって。
随分と悠長なのね。青子があなたを守るのは今日までだって聞いているけど、私に取り入る機会はこれが最後なのに。それともあれだけ忠告されておいてまだ何も分かっていないの？
He had not. He swore to her, agreed to her terms, and gone as far as to sit face to face with her to get to know her. Surely, he thought, this was enough to escape death. And she believed, as a mage, that his naive goodwill and simple-mindedness were all the reasons she needed to execute him. Trivial misunderstandings would only make things worse at this point.
そりゃ何もわからないよ。魔術とか魔法とか、たった数日でわかるもんか。はっきりしているのは、アリスも青崎も言ったことはきっちり守るってことだけだ。
No, you came 5 minutes late yesterday.
ならどうして？
Her gaze said what she really wanted to ask. She wanted to know why he did not beg for his life. She knew the answer. She saw the look on his face when he turned to leave without so much as trying to wake her. A look of resignation. What on earth had it meant?
どうしてって、そう言われても困る。そうだな。機会が訪れなかったのなら、それはそういうことだと思ったのかもしれない。
Wow. If I die, I die. That's his thought process.
君の寝顔はそれぐらい、なんていうか、判断に困った。青崎とは違う意味で、簡単には関われないと思ったんだ。
Sojiro struggled to find the right words, but said what he was feeling in the moment anyways. He had seen the sleeping witch of the woods, who clearly needed someone's help, yet sought the help of no one.
そう。でも、しずきくんは関わろうとしているのね。その機会は訪れなかったのに。
機会はやってきたよ。なんで、こっちも今日ぐらいは自分の勝手にして無茶をしたくなったんだ。
しずきくんの言う通りなら、私はあなたを拒絶するしかないのに。
まあ、そこが難しいところなんだけど。
Sojiro glanced at the entrance. He had no reason to, he just felt an urge to do so.
多分、そこを解決したがってるのは俺だけじゃないと思うよ。
He muttered as if speaking to himself, but it was clearly meant for her to hear. Alice knew full well how poorly he had understood the situation. All of this was one giant misunderstanding on his part. His tiny gesture of goodwill, pitiful and pure, resembled that of someone reaching out to help a dying kitten. No, not dying kittens. For Alice, doing so would be akin to clutching the thorns of a rose. She felt pain in her chest for the first time in quite a while.
けど、私はあなたの同居を認めてはいないわ。
She addressed the floor at her feet to avoid showing him how she truly felt. If he had, he would have seen that her face looked just the way Aoko's had earlier.
だろうな。それはきっと今は解決できない問題だ。でもそのうち何かの気まぐれであっさり終わるものかもしれない。だからその時までアリスはずっと俺を嫌っていていいんだと思う。
Wow. He's like, you can hate me. We'll try to work something out. I think it'll turn out alright, hopefully. Her gasp of breath was like a response in of itself. To suggest that she could keep hating him. She had once wished to hear those words so dearly, if only once.
大体だぞ。アリスだけじゃなく、青崎も同居を認めてない節があるじゃないか。 だから認めてもらうなんて意気込み自体が間違いなんだ。どうあっても俺は青崎や君たちとは違うんだし。となると、あとは我慢してもらうしかない。難しい話だけど、一緒にいても邪魔にならないぐらいなら、その可能性は上がらないか?
Thinking that, of course, it was possible, but if it were that easy, none of this would have been necessary in the first place. Alice nodded in agreement. There was no way he could have planned for things to work out this well. But his plan, in fact, had worked, if inadvertently, from the moment the conversation began.
例えば、あなたが隣にいても眠っていられるぐらいに。
Ah!
そうだね。例えばの話。
Ah, so that's how it worked out. That's actually pretty cool. Beaming, Sojiro stood up and left the foyer. Yeah, it's like she doesn't want him in the house because she doesn't want him to be a nuisance to her life. But by doing what he did, it showed that she doesn't have to acknowledge him. She won't be a bother. It'll be as if he's not there. He can continue to live his life and she can continue to live hers. Huh. Alice did not stop him this time. He had a newfound spring in his step as he headed to work. But something gave him a moment's pause.
実際、覗き見は趣味が悪いと思う。
Hi, Aoko. He complained aloud to make sure a certain someone heard him. No more than 2 minutes had passed since Sojiro left the mansion when a long-haired figure came creeping into the foyer. Aoko Aozaki had been just outside the entire time, eavesdropping.
帰ってたの。
Oh, it's a new song. With a sullen glare, Alice addressed the interloper. Aoko was shivering from head to toe after standing in the cold for so long. She deemed gloves an abomination and refused to wear them except in the most extreme cold. As a result, her slender fingers were pitifully swollen and red. That's so dumb, but I feel the same exact way. I hate gloves, and I won't wear them ever.
ちょっと前にね。それでどうだったの、アリス。随分と話してたみたいだけど。
She looked strangely elated as she blew on her hands to warm them. Alice was not fooled by Aoko's facade, clear from the ill-tempered look she wore on her face.
あなたがここまで過保護とは思わなかったわ。意地？それとも義務？どっちかっていうと成り行きね。で、どうだったのよ結果は。気に食わなかったら実力行使に出るって言ってたじゃない。
Alice's mood was growing darker and darker the longer she had looked at Aoko's cheerful posture. She's like, oh man, Aoko's cheerful posturing is making me so angry. She's really annoying me. They all went back to their dinner together the previous night. After everything had happened in the foyer, Alice was both more suspicious of and intrigued by Sojiro than ever before. She insisted that Aoko let him walk home alone the next day. She then used the concoction to fake her slumber and recreate the same scene as the previous day. That portion of her plan went well, but the rest had veered totally off course. It did not help to know that her roommate had savored every moment of it from the other side of the wall either. To make matters worse, Alice was frustrated at herself for letting such trivial matters bother her. She stared at the teacup, still sitting on the floor. Her pale fingers traced its cold rim.
青子の言う通り、害にはならない人ね。あくまで今のところの話だけど。
Yes, he passed the test. She forced a tone of indifference in order to hide her irritation with her apprentice. It was in this moment that Sojiro's fate was decided. Yes, he survived.
あら、それだけ？アリスにしては長く話してたのに。
So smug. So smug. Relentless, Aoko continued her line of questioning. Alice only stared back icily.
青子、あなた、隠していたわね。
Time for your punishment. She voiced her displeasure at Aoko's behavior in no uncertain terms. Suddenly, the air in the foyer felt cold as ice. They stared at one another, each trying to guess the other's next move.
さすがね。 よくそこに気がついたもんだわ。でも、こればかりは譲れないのよ。
Alco widened her stance and glared at Alice.
何もすべて奪うとは言っていないわ。そうね。あなたにも3割ぐらいは回すつもり。
Huh. I wonder what this is for. It suddenly got really serious. Maybe it has to do with that mage that Alice has to encounter or something. Completely unperturbed by Alco's warlike posturing, a simple look was all Alice needed to keep her roommate in check.
10が3に化けちゃ、ちょっと黙ってらんないわね。
高望みは命取りよ、青子。
Like Icarus. Alice remained calm and dignified, not moving a muscle. It felt like hours had passed as the two stared at each other in silence. Alco was grinding her teeth in frustration. At this rate, their alliance would be in tatters before they even confronted their foe. And worst of all, she knew Alice had the upper hand.
Catch.
Alco accepted her defeat with a
悔しいけど、アリスが6、私が4で手を打つわ。
It pained her to settle for less. Alice nodded in satisfaction.
そうね。家主は私だけど、彼を招いたのは青子だから。
Oh,
その代わり、家賃の取り立てはあなたの役割ね。
that's what it was for. Okay. All right. They are homeowners, so I guess.
いいけど。
No.
ああ、情けない。こんなことなら錬金術でもかじっておくんだった。
No. He still has to pay rent. All his money gone.
そうでもないわ。彼ら、バブルが弾けて大変だって話よ。
It's all about the market. Alice spoke with such confidence as someone with first-hand experience of such matters, yet Alco only nodded absent-mindedly in response. Their bitter fight was over how to split the take of Sojiro's rent now that he was officially going to move in. Not the most becoming quarrel for a pair of mages. Forcing a boy to live with them and then demanding he pay rent was beyond extortion. It was truly vicious.
でも、そんなセリフが出るってことは、アリスもようやく認めたってことね。
Alco was triumphantly satisfied with herself.
認めてはいないけど、公園での夜、彼を結界で捕捉しなかった責任があるから。彼と約束をした青子だけを責められないでしょ。
約束。
Alco looked up at the ceiling as she recalled the night at the amusement park. Only a week at most had passed since then, but Alco had already felt that Sojiro's fate and her own had become intrinsically linked. Or perhaps they had always been connected by fate since the moment they'd met. She could not see into the future, so there was no way to know for sure.
ま、縁とか運とかはともかく、変だけどいいやつよね、あいつ。
She's just real weird. A thought uttered to herself in self-confirmation, more than to Alice. Alice could only look on in annoyance, perhaps in an attempt to voice her displeasure at her comment.
青子、あの傷を知ってる？
We can finally learn about it. Alice raised her slender fingers to her mouth, as if to push the words back in. She had blurted it out in the heat of the moment. A secret that no one else was supposed to know, but that which one couldn't keep to herself. Alco tilted her head in confusion. Alice looked relieved for some reason. Her sudden antipathy towards Alco had dissipated as well.
幸せな人。
Said Alice, as she took a sip of her cold tea. She made no attempt to explain who was fortunate or why. A moment later, her beautiful face contorted in revulsion. Oh, my tea! She abandoned the cup to the floor once more. Her black dress unceremoniously scrunched up as she stood. Just one sip of the underbrewed tea sent her fleeing to the drawing room to remove the bad taste from her mouth. As soon as she was gone, Alco hesitantly took the teacup in her own hands. It was almost certainly better left untasted, but she could not help but wonder how Sojiro's tea could arouse such a strong response. After one small sip, she returned it quietly to the floor.
だからティーバッグにしろって言ったのに、あのバカ。
Fuck. The expression on her face was nearly identical to that of her roommates. Oh. Oh, yeah, that was gonna be the end of the chapter. Are you for real? Oh, it says a new book has been added to the archive. I was thinking this would be a good time for a new book to be added because, like, we're at a point where it seems like we're back at the stalemate, or like back to the status quo, where we're not everyone is super pissed off at each other anymore, and they can kind of live on with their own lives. Sojiro has settled in, and his roommates aren't trying to kill him. So we can do more side stuff. So it's going to be this. So it's called Martha. Just that? So this is that. This is that. This is that. I see. So we only have one book, which is Martha. But I don't know how long this is, but I feel like it's going to take quite a while. So I'll tackle this side story next time. Until then, I will be seeing you. See ya!